Would you like to take your seats, please? Yeah. Can you take your seats? Great. Okay. Well, we're going to start the afternoon panels. It's a great honor for me to be here as a FIABCI past world president and as an educator, because today we're going to talk about the global real estate markets and finance. That's, having had Hernando de Soto this morning, it's a very big question. What is happening in the world? We're lucky enough to have a very distinguished panel, which will, I think, set the ground rules of how we look at what's happening in different areas of our global real estate community. I'm going to introduce our first panelist, who is the mayor of Taichung, Taiwan. He has agreed to come here. We have agreed, and we are thrilled to be invited to give the FIABCI World Congress next year in his city, in Taichung. And thank you very much for inviting us. So I hope that we have as good a panel today as we will have a good as Congress next year in Taichung. So Mayor Hugh, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Chairman Joseph, President Joseph, and distinguished panelists, I'm very happy and honored to be here to meet all of you. I think it's very noble of you not to go out in such a wonderful weather and still stay with the Congress. You're professional and enthusiastic. What I can promise you is that when we have the next Congress in my city, I would make sure the weather is worse than this. The least I can do. Yes, I like to come here to welcome you to the 64th Congress of FIABCI. It'll be wonderful to have you in my city. Most of you may have not heard of my city before. So I will make the best use of the next 20 minutes to tell you as much as I can about this wonderful place. I hope you could visit or find out more about it by next year. First, this is a traditional Chinese book, and I am trying to tell you to read Taichung. What do I mean by that? Real estate amazing decade in Taichung. READ has a different meaning for us real estate industry. The past 10 years in Taichung has probably never been seen in any other part of the world. So I'm very happy to present to you what would real estate industry do in 10 years to change a city. Read in Taichung. I will first, instead of talking, show you a very brief film about Taichung. Seeing is believing, instead of me talking. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a very brave film, and the music was from The Warrior of the Rainbow. It's a movie about Aborigines Taiwanese people. We have flew in the actress and the actor who are marvelous singers to perform tomorrow night for you. We want to impress you with their talent. Anyway, remember what I said? What city do I come from? Taiwan? Let me tell you. About 5 years ago, I went to London. I was given an award, City of the Year in category of arts and culture. And they announced Taichung. And many people behind me said, Tai what? Never heard of it before. But what is Taichung? Huh? Taichung is about twice the size of Hong Kong and 3 times bigger than Singapore. And the population is about less than half compared to Hong Kong, just about half compared to Singapore. And if you see the next chart, I'll tell you, median age of the people of Taichung is about 34.8, under 35 years of age. Most of us in the room are too old for my city. If you're in Hong Kong, median age is 42. If you're in Singapore, median age is 38. Taichung stands out. Very young city, full of young people. People over 15 years of age having a college education is about 36%. Hong Kong, 25%. Singapore, just about like my city, 37%. Service industry, we have 50% of the workforce working in service industry. In Hong Kong, 67, larger than us. In Singapore, even better, 69. So we have a lot to catch up with. But Taichung, I am proud to say, is a new star on the horizon. Let's see, where is Taichung located exactly? If you come to Taiwan next year, you fly to Japan, you are about 3 hours from Taichung. You go to Hong Kong, you're about 1.5 hours from Taichung. You go to Shanghai, 1.5 hours from Taichung. If you talk about shipping, put 5 major ports in Asia. You know, I put Taichung in anyway, that's my city. But Hong Kong, Shanghai, Tokyo, Singapore, these are the 4 largest ports in Asia. And you put all 5 ports together, which one is closest to all the other 4? Taichung. It has a very great location. Our port is growing rapidly. Incidentally, Tokyo and Singapore are far away from the rest of us. We're not well known internationally, but as I told you, in 2007 in London, we were voted City of the Year in category of arts and culture. We're very happy about it. And 2 years later, a year later, we were voted the Progressive Architecture Award in 2008, a year later, because of we are redeveloping a park. And we built an information box that, again, 3 years later, won the Progressional Architecture Award by the American publication. Incidentally, one of the newest films, it's being made by director An Lee, is about the life of Pi. One of the newest films from Hollywood is being filmed almost entirely on location in Taichung. It's about the story of a little boy and a tiger outside Indian Ocean, but it's filmed in Taichung. I'll give the secret away. The latest recognition we received was that we were recognized as one of the top 7 cities in terms of intelligent city ranking. which I think is very encouraging. We were the only city in Asia and the Pacific area which became one of the top 7, and I may have to go to New York to receive that award next month. What about the decade of real estate amazing achievement between 2002 and 2011? You see the chart. Family increase total 118%. House purchase rate goes faster. More and more people are buying new houses, 134%. And housing price grew 160%. Ownership also increases. About 80% of the people own more than 80% own their houses in my city, which is one of the highest in my country. And then, talking about real estate again, real estate trading, the number of real estate trading per year in my city grew 160% in 10 years' time. Land value grew 160%, 158.4 in 10 years. Index of urban land value grew 117%. Of course, the government then, because of the active, prosperous real estate trading, we receive a lot of tax. The tax grew 175%, almost 180% increase. I become a rich government, so I could, I have more business coming in. I have more investment, many more investment. I have 123 billion US dollar investment in my city, which is probably one of the highest in the world. Also, I told you about the airport. I had a very small international airport, but because of the growth of the economy, of course, including real estate, the total number of international travelers coming to the city in 10 years, in 7 years' time, is 20,000%, 200 times increase. Sea shipping, cargo, tonnage, and throughput have all increased as listed there. I have indicated that because of the prosperous economic growth, I have become a richer city. The city revenue grew 146%, and the spending power of the government, I become much more powerful in spending money while decreasing my debt. You can see I decreased about 6,000% of my debt and increased spending. I have saving too. The president of my country, once seeing nobody around, asked me, "Jason, how much money have you hide? Are you hiding?" I look at him, I say, "I don't want to tell you, because I need more support from him, so I don't want to tell you." He then got a little angry. He said, "Even if you don't tell me, I'm a president, I could find out." I say, "Go find out, don't ask me." So this is the true story anyway. I want to tell you, other than economic progress, some other things that have also accordingly improved in the city. One is cultural event. You can look at Pavarotti. We were the last city in Asia, the only city he has ever visited in my country for a concert. And then Andrea Bocelli, probably the same story, El Divo. And lastly, last year, Lady Gaga came. She enjoyed my city, gave us a lot of prosperity. It was very sad that Pavarotti passed away after having a concert in my city. But we love him. Don't do that. This is a culture event. I forgot to tell you, when I became mayor, each citizen participated each year in less than 4 times cultural event. By the end of the 9-year period, they participated more than 35%. A growth of participation in cultural events from 4 times a year to almost 35 times a year. That's a 800%, nearly 900% growth. So I'm very grateful to the citizens of my people. Incidentally, I was also picked up by a magazine from England called Monopoly, as 10 of the, city slickers, i.e. mayors with recognized mayor with recognized achievement. And they picked me up because I have dramatically improved law and order in my city. Less theft, less burglary, less robbery, and everything. You can see I don't look better than the other people I know, but still, I'm okay. A while after this, I received an email picture from a citizen of my city. He said, Mr. Mayor, you're a great mayor. You have done well for the law and order improvement. So I have to support you. Even my dog supports you. When I ride a motorbike, I wear a security helmet. My dog wears one too. Where can you find good dog like this? Only in Taichung. This is just part of the story I want to tell you. Let's talk slightly about the future. We've only just begun. Let me show you. These are some of the new investment projects already being done in Taichung. I can show you one called Foxconn Robot Empire decided to invest in my city more than $3 billion to create 2,000 jobs. Taiwan Semiconductor Company uses $10 billion US to build 8,000 jobs. All this means that I would have 15,000 new jobs in 2 to 3 years' time. That would create new residents about, roughly 43,000 people, new houses, new other requirements, and also good for the real estate industry. This is the already existing investment project. The city is growing rapidly for all various reasons, and I have new projects. These are some of the new projects, including cable car, MRT, BRT, urban renewal projects, and all that. And this altogether means an investment opportunity, public and private, $16 billion. One of them I have to show you, at the very end, is I repeatedly have shown you a new project which I bring a model of. Is the new Taiwan Tower in the new park. 150 years ago, this is not my Taiwan Tower. This is in Paris. But remember, when the Paris Eiffel Tower was built, there were all kinds of arguments. This is a tower that radically revolutionized the concept of a tower. It's called Taiwan Tower. It will start to be built by the end of the year. I can show you a picture. We're very proud of that. And it would look like that when it's completed. It has all the features of a green building. It's what they call formless, timeless, transparent design, and save about 50% of the energy and all that. So we're very proud of this project. And also, we're showing a lot of the information about this project outside. Whatever I say is not enough. They only give me 20 minutes, and I think I've done less than 20 minutes, or am I over time? Just about 2 minutes. I'm over 2 minutes? Okay, Enough. Whatever I say, you may not believe me. I'm a politician anyway. Come and see us next year. That's all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
How did you get the name Jason?
My mother. Sure. Well, all yours. I thought.
I'd like to call up the world president to come and make a recognition. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. As Jason who said, it's much better to see by your own eyes. I visited Taichung last year, and I can tell you, this is unbelievable, fantastic, dynamic city. And from the point of sustainability, green development, I think it's one of the best cities in the world.
When did you give this?
And it's really an honor to have the mayor, Jason, who with us today. Especially for the coincidence, today is his birthday. So we want to congratulate Jason Hu with his birthday and give us a small gift appreciation from the St. Petersburg Imperial Porcelain Factory. Mr. Hu.
Oh, thank you so much. How do you know? How do you say happy birthday in Russian?
День рождения.
Thank you. First time anybody said happy birthday in Russia to me.
Okay, that's a first in FIABCI. Alexander, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Holger Muller, who is with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PricewaterhouseCoopers in Russia. He has a lot of international experience. I actually was looking through all the countries he's been educated in, France, Germany, and I said, did you go to the same business school as I did? And he said, I wish I had. So we're privileged to have you to come and speak to us today. Can I introduce you to Holger Muller? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Unfortunately, it's not my birthday today, and it's not even to the extent I know. It's not even my wedding day, but my wife would know better probably. It's anyway difficult for me to, after booming Asia, to speak now about what the American Secretary of Defense called Old Europe. And I probably would like to warn you that the results of my presentation might look at first glance a bit difficult, but don't write us off. I think difficult times and some parts of Europe are certainly in real estate and in general living through difficult times are always a great chance to make a lot of money, as every shrewd investor can tell you. I will talk about the results of the Emerging Trends report, which PwC every year does all over the world, together with the ULI, the Urban Land Institute. For this, we are interviewing about 700 key decision makers from the real estate industry all over Europe, mainly the top management or the owners. I found it quite interesting to go through the titles of the reports we have issued in the last 5 years, and I just thought to a certain extent that it was sad that I hadn't looked at them earlier. I think this report, if you see the report for 2007, that's the one which based on interviews at the end of 2006. And I have to say, we were here in full enthusiasm in real estate in Russia. I don't know how you saw it over there in your countries. really just until the day Lehman finally got bankrupt. So you saw there already at the end of 2006, the writing was on the wall, obviously. At the end of 2007, fear is back. People had a very clear understanding. And then we see what comes later. These are all quotes from the interviews we have done for this report. So we come to the findings of the 2012 report, which bases on interviews which we have done by the end of 2011. And this has the nice title, Prepare for the Big Freeze, which as I said, is not really heartwarming, but let's see. These are the results. One thing is the big freeze in lending, and I think since over the 8 months, or 7 months, which have gone since we've finalized this report, the situation most likely hasn't become better. So you see that in general there's a strong risk seen by market participants that there will be less debt available over the next year. I found it quite interesting to see that especially the banks themselves, they saw that the risk that there will be less financing available at 94%, and those fund managers still are a bit more optimistic, but well, one will have to see who is right, but probably there's a reason to assume that the bankers perhaps know better than the fund managers what the real situation is. We're coming to equity capital. Here the picture is a bit better. So you see that more people still expect that there will be the same or more equity available for real estate investments over the next 12 months. And it's interesting that here, especially those who are sitting on the equity, institutional equity investors, that they are most optimistic on the availability of equity in the next year. What I found interesting is as well the chance for forced asset sales. This is, I think, something which we in the real estate industry all are waiting for 2 reasons. The one thing is we would like to see that the banks get cleared up so that they can start new business, and at the same time we of course hope to make good deals by getting cheaply those distressed assets. But it is still, in view of the situation, it is still not that much. I mean, we see 60% expect an increase of forced sales by lenders, but it's only 60%. So this seems to me still a very weak number. And it's even interesting that it's again the bankers who are most pessimistic on an increase of forced sales. It's only they see only 52% see a rise of forced sales, while the institutional investors, there are 65% who expect that these forced sales will increase. Now, the good news is, I think, that we have overall the numbers are improving, which might be partly perhaps simply for the reason that 2011 was so bad that it couldn't get worse. But in any case, I mean, coming back to Hernando de Soto's presentation this morning, the question is always in which direction we are going. And I think if we see already that people are becoming more optimistic, and especially in view of the titles of the report, which I've mentioned earlier, these people seem to have a very good understanding of what's going on. I think that's a very good sign that, in general, the number of people who expect for things to improve has gone up. These are the 27 cities we are analyzing for this report. And everybody can have an opinion on every city, every interviewed person. It was quite interesting that in putting together this report, the years before, people were much more ready to comment on other cities as well. And this time, everybody has a very small focus. And this is also a sign that people are really focusing on what they know best in the current risk situation. And therefore, it was more difficult to get information, say, for example, from somebody sitting in Paris about Moscow. You see the green cities, which are the most favored cities right now. Yellow is fair, and then, not very surprisingly, the red ones in Southern Europe are at the end, of the overall ranking, and I think they're probably still there. Here we have the numbers put together. So we have asked for existing investments, how will your investments which you have already in these cities develop? Then if you invest into new investments, into new completed buildings this year, how will this develop, and how will do developments? And I think here this is just the top 10 of the list. I think what is quite interesting, you have those cities which are stable, the safe havens like the German cities now, Munich, Berlin, Hamburg, London and Zurich. London is seen as very safe as well, but it's already too expensive, and that's why it came down only on the 10th place. We then have those cities where people see a lot of opportunities because of the strong growth and the way these countries came through the crisis, and this is Istanbul, Warsaw, and Moscow. We were very happy to see our capital in this list, making it to the top 10 again this year. And this is mainly due to the overall still very positive economic situation in Russia, positive especially when compared to the rest of Europe. You see over there that for development, Moscow is even on the 2nd place. This is also a small wonder because there's simply an enormous demand to catch up with international cities. So Moscow already for the last 6 years, I'll show this later, has always taken a leading place for developments. And I think this is something very often overlooked by foreign investors, unfortunately also especially I think by my own compatriots in Germany, who look more at the risks of Russia and less at the opportunities. We have here also an overview. Those which are yellow means that we expect more. So we expect more amounts invested in the cities from Istanbul to London. We expect rents to stay stable in all these cities which we have here, although I can say that already in Moscow they are going up. And in capital values expecting rises only for Istanbul and Munich. So whereas Russia in general looks better than the rest of Europe. You see here that the availability of debt capital, they're even very courageous. 7% of Russians who expect to have more debt capital available in 2012 than in the year before. And in general, the outlook for debt capital is more positive. We see this every time when we talk to our clients here in Russia. It's mainly the Russian banks, and there are mainly 3 states Russian banks who are very interested to stay on the real estate market and which easily have taken over that position which has been vacated by the foreign banks here, especially the German lenders who have all left the market. We are also for availability of equity. It's also still enough equity here, and I think I see especially high opportunity, high potential for real estate in Russia. Real estate is the classical protection against inflation, and Russia has been over the last 20 years twice hit by very strong inflation. So I think people are much more sensitive to any risk of inflation and therefore much more ready to go into real estate. And this is certainly one of the factors which sustain the interest in real estate in Russia at this point of time. Just some thoughts on St. Petersburg, since this is our host city. St. Petersburg is not included in the overall list of these 27 cities, and this, although it is the 4th biggest city in Europe, which already tells you something about the situation. It is, in general, St. Petersburg has developed very slowly over the last years. It's to some extent comparable to Moscow because it's relatively underdeveloped, even much more than Moscow in terms of office space, for example. There are not a lot of quality assets, which would be interesting for international institutional investors. Is, as the rest of Russia, strongly dependent on commodity rises and is subject to the Russian risk. At the same time, and some people, after the last crisis, which hit St. Petersburg in particularly strong, some people somehow wanted to write it off. Here again, I think something is going on, and I would compare St. Petersburg probably to Berlin, which has a couple of similarities. Berlin was also, before the First World War, the biggest and most important city of Germany, the richest city, as was St. Petersburg for Russia. It still has a lot of very nice and old buildings. It has lost most of its production. St. Petersburg has been able to attract more, while Berlin has the government. But I think what is interesting, the growth which we see in Berlin right now is not something of big production facilities or banks or insurance companies. It's the IT sector, which is very strong. It's the press. It's everything which is linked to intelligent people. So it's attracting a lot of people who are interested by a vibrant big city, which is relatively cheap, and that's where Moscow and St. Petersburg and Berlin are quite similar. And if you look here, again from our emerging trends ranking, you see that Moscow went up to the top place in 2008 for existing investments, then went down in 2010, and then up again in 2012. Berlin had been for 20 years very at the low bottom of our ranking, and then recently it went up, and you see the same thing for developments as well, where Berlin is just going up, and I think it's just this process which I see starting in St. Petersburg as well, that the city had been written off like Berlin had been written off for many years, but slowly it's coming up again, and it's not coming up only because of the automotive industry or somebody is putting a big corporate headquarters here, but it's mainly the overall development of small companies which come here because it's a very attractive place to go, and they are the main reason for growth. I've been asked to be very quick, so I'm at the end of my presentation already. Would like to thank you very much for your attention, and Mr. Chairman, I hope I kept with my time limit. Thank you very much.
My speakers are being very timely today, which is great. It's my pleasure next to introduce another past world president of FIABCI, Alfons Metzger. Alfons is one of my mentors. He's someone I admire incredibly. He comes from Austria, but I would call him a global real estate practitioner. He has his own real estate practice, he's a valuer, and he's always there helping others and leading the way in global real estate. He is a FIABCI real estate pioneer, especially in valuation, and I'd like to call him to the podium for his speech. Thank you.
I'm here again. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, meine Damen und Herren, ich spreche Deutsch, weil Deutsch eine Amtssprache der
It's a great pleasure for me to be able to speak here in German, in my mother tongue. And I would like to devote my presentation to the topic that was extremely important for our projects in Europe. We are talking about the financial and economic crisis. And therefore, I would like to speak about the formation of bubbles, about their impact on our business, on real estate in particular. The financial situation is a very important factor for all of you working on the market. Because the breaks between crises become shorter and shorter. Because it's very important when we start the project, when we start sales, the slump phase that lasts for 2 or 3 years, and the market creates a lot of difficulties for us, and we need to take that into account. But I would like to reassure you, ladies and gentlemen, the financial crisis and the bubbles have been in existence for many hundreds of years. I've been studying this phenomenon for many years, and the crisis always evolved according to the same pattern. And the wheels of fortune continue to rumble on. There were speculative transactions, there were situations with a surplus of money in the market. The Medici financed the Pope of Rome and their wars in the 16th and 17th centuries, and then they went bankrupt. They couldn't get their money back. With regard to Germany, there was a banker's family of the Fugger family, and they also failed after the 30-year war, which started in 1658. We should also mention speculations on Dutch tulips, speculative deals with Dutch tulips. You remember that in those days investors decided to invest money in tulips, and this can be compared with the promotion of Rolls-Royce in the market. Hundreds of millions were invested in those flowers, and in 20 years this money never came back because it was a true speculative transaction. In 1720, in France, there was such a speculative dealer as John Law. We should also mention the financial collapse of Germany in 1873, the foreign exchange collapse in the US in 1929. In 1987, we had a similar crisis, and then the crisis developed in 1998 in Southeast Asia, and then we had the dot-com crisis of the 2000s. Let's come back to the development of our today's crisis. The real crisis started as far back as the second half of the 1980s. At that time, the 8 largest banks were located in Japan, and they started to buy securities. Those were very strong banks. They invested their funds in various companies, and they started to do whatever they can to make sure that their banks become as strong as possible, and they tried to strengthen their reputation. When the securities price went down, they had to doctor their balance sheets, and 8 largest banks in Japan eventually went under. They ended up in bankruptcy. The government somehow tried to resist the situation. All of this led to the securitization process. The German banks invented securitization in the first place. This is a great tool, but finally you will have to pay a lot for it. It's a pity that it wasn't available at the end of the 1980s when the Berlin Wall collapsed, the bipolar world fell apart, the USSR was disbanded, and at the end of the 1990s, the US came into the forefront. The Iron Curtain was lifted, and a multipolar world emerged, consisting of the US, Europe, China, South America, and so on and so forth. Then, in the 1990s, in the US, they started to pursue a liberal policy, and today we see that this new liberalism is speculative capitalism, actually, and it also has failed, as well as communism. These two systems have not led to any positive outcomes. And now we need to create new systems on the basis of which we will shape our future. At the same time, globalization began and Europeization, let's say. East European countries were prepared to change the vector of their development. They learned what democracy and capitalism is all about. As far as markets are concerned, the situation evolved as follows. New markets came into being, and if you ask me what future markets are going to look like, I will tell you that here we will have markets of East Europe, such as Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan. Other markets will emerge. Here we have a lot of demand for residential real estate, for commercial real estate, and we've seen this year some negative trends. Nobody has ever calculated the requirements. A huge number of shopping malls and residential real estate was erected, but nobody checked whether there is actually a demand for such huge areas in these sectors. Nobody checked whether flats are being bought at all, whether they become property of people. Such studies were never undertaken, and therefore projects ended up in difficult situations and sustained losses. But in spite of all this, I would like to say that these markets that I mentioned above in the future will play a leading role, and I would like to advise you to invest there. Invest in emerging countries in East Europe. Go to South America, invest there, invest in China. And of course, everything should be based on careful analyses and estimates, but securitization models that I mentioned before, here everything depends on basic estimates. Securitization of separate components that we mentioned earlier today is a wonderful financing model, but it is necessary that the initial cost or value is calculated correctly. Therefore, we need correct and appropriate valuation models. This is required not only by the real estate sector, but by other segments of the economy as well. Now these models are in a kind of a crisis. We need to revisit them. We need to recalculate the fair value, and this needs to be discussed with banks, because I think that without banks, economies won't exist. We also need to look at the development of banks, at how they interfere with the current situation in the economy. And I think that the consequences of this crisis will be as follows. The population doesn't understand the situation. Let's see what they say on the TV about investments measured in trillions. And the most important thing is that European and international banks operate in a unified way. If we take the situation in Greece, we will see that if Greece fails, many French and German banks will fail as well, and this will entail huge losses. No write-offs will save the situation then. The prerequisites for such a turn of events are like these. Too much money on the market, people create products that are speculative by their nature, that lead to speculative deals. If we take the US crisis, then people bought apartments and houses using mortgage loans. we had a meeting, a FIABCI business meeting devoted to this problem. We visited various projects in the United States. Those were buildings which had been vacant for many years. Then certain initiatives were undertaken to sell those properties. Huge discounts were offered for those apartments and houses. And at that time I raised the question, how can you sell those apartments so easily? But it turned out that investors were losing a lot of money, therefore they had to offer such discounts and sell. Apart from that, there are hopes of huge margins, and this stimulates business people to finance projects, to buy properties. And of course, here we need to look at the value of those properties and projects. We should make sure that this value is not eroded. Now, bubbles. Bubbles do not always burst at once. Such bursts are not always sudden and simultaneous. Those bubbles tend to accumulate. Today's crisis is a crisis of valuation. Of course, models were created to resist this crisis. For example, securitization was one such tool, as I mentioned before. And if we look at how banks resolve this situation, we'll see that they have assets. Some assets have to be written off. For this, they need securitization. And at the same time, they should have such assets that they will never have to write off. And this will allow them to pursue projects that they will always be able to sell. Such a problem emerged, for example, in Greece, where projects in the field of real estate also became bubbles of some sort. The situation in the economy is, of course, very important, and here we need to follow the response from the political circles. Politicians not always operate effectively. For example, we can take a look at the situation with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Chancellor Kohl and the then French president were great politicians indeed. They understood the aspirations of their peoples and they acted accordingly. But today, in Europe, politicians do not always understand what their people needs. And therefore, many people go out into the streets. For example, in Spain, we observe this problem. In developing countries, we also observe certain difficulties. There must be growth, of course. And if the growth is 8 to 10% per annum, this is a great indicator. It means that with such growth, it will be possible to buy new equipment, to buy and build new real estate projects. But if the growth is not as high, what happens then? Slow growth means that there will be no resources for further development. And this in itself entails a risk of recession. And therefore, it is necessary to undertake all possible measures to maintain the growth at a permanent level, at a stable level. I think that there are quite a few standards available in order to keep the banks afloat, so to speak. But those standards are not always applied. These standards should probably be modified. And here politics play a very important role. Politicians must monitor the situation. Over the past 15 years, the situation was such that revenues were seldom discussed. The major incentive was increase in the value. The value was growing at a very high pace for several months in a row. Those trends were absolutely unrealistic, and of course this gave abundant food for thought. In my presentation I tried to briefly outline this topic. We are experts in real estate, and we bear huge responsibility. We must educate the public, but on the other hand, we must implement projects. We must say whether projects are realistic or not. We should not encourage people with false hopes. We need to understand when you should sell a property and when you should not sell the property. These trends have been in operation for centuries, but now the intervals between crises become shorter and shorter. In 2028, the crisis was very deep. After the recession, there will be growth, but after the growth, there will be a crisis. But we should we should continue to develop in a stable way. This is my message to all of you. We bear huge responsibility as experts in real estate, as FIABCI. And we need to observe, on top of that, ethical norms and moral values. And I'm very happy that FIABCI keeps up high moral standards. Without this, we won't be able to survive. We need to help each other. We need to educate people. We need to raise awareness. We need to do whatever we can to make sure that losses in value do not persist into the future.
Alfons, thank you very much. Now I'd like to introduce Michael Milligan, Economic Affairs Officer for Housing and Land Development at Unit UN of the Economic Commission for Europe. He's going to talk about real estate markets and the sustainable economy. Michael, all yours.
Hello, my name is Michael Milligan. Thank you very much for inviting me here today to talk about some of the work we do in the United Nations. In particular, I'm going to talk some of the work being done by my unit. By my unit, the Housing and Land Management Unit, which is one of the units of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. I'm going to be talking about efforts that we're doing in cooperation with other groups and individuals to promote real estate markets as a driving force of a healthy economy. Our region covers much of North America, nearly all of Europe, Russia, and Central Asia. We currently have 8 areas of work. We are involved in many fields, and we do a lot, although we are rather small. We have only 220 staff, a budget of about $50 million, and our official languages are English, French, and Russian. One of the units of the UNEC, is the Housing and Land Management Unit, which is my unit. This unit has its roots in the Panel on Housing Problems, which was started in 1947, in the same year as the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Our unit facilitates dialogue between governments for sharing practices, giving advice, and developing policy guidelines. Our committee, the Committee on Housing and Land Management, is an intergovernmental body which sets policies related to housing, land administration, and land management. This slide shows the structure of our organization. As the Secretariat, we work directly with the committee and advisory bodies, and one of these advisory bodies is REM, the Real Estate Market Advisory Group, and that's the primary body I'm going to be talking about today. The Real Estate Market Advisory Group is a group of real estate experts which advises the committee on matters related to real estate. Currently, our group has representatives from the private sector. This includes our vice chair, Enrico Campagnoli, who is a past president of FIABCI. It also includes Wolfgang Amann, who is leading the session on social housing tomorrow. Our organization also has consultants from the public sector and from international institutions, including a member from the World Bank. This group helps member states to develop sound real estate markets which can contribute to economic growth. It produces publications to help achieve this goal and organizes roundtable discussions and workshops to promote experience sharing and real estate best practices. In particular, I'm going to be talking about one of REM's publications, the Policy Framework for Sustainable Real Estate Markets, Principles and Guidelines for the Development of a Country's Real Estate Sector. I'm then going to talk about roundtable discussions around Europe that have been held to promote this framework and some of the results of those discussions. These roundtables involve private experts and public officials who, with guidance from the UNECE and REM, work to apply best housing practices to their countries. The policy framework was released in April 2010 to provide guidelines for the development of sound real estate markets. The principles of the framework are listed here: an integrated legal framework, efficient land register and cadastre, efficiency of services, prerequisites for the development of sound real estate markets, good governance, sustainable financing, transparency and advanced financial products, property valuation, social housing, training, and capacity building. The 4 roundtables I'm going to talk about were all organized in partnership with other organizations. There was a roundtable in Kiev, Ukraine, organized on 18 June 2010 in partnership with FIABCI Ukraine. Another roundtable in Lisbon in 2011, organized with FIABCI Portugal and the Portuguese Real Estate Agents and Professionals Association. There was the roundtable in Rome in May 2011, organized with Tecnoborsa, Confederalia, FIABCI, Federal Immobilier, and FIAIP, and a roundtable in Moscow in January 2012, organized with the World Bank and the Ministry of Economy of the Russian Federation. All of these roundtables, by the way, begin with invitations from the host country governments. The United Nations does activities upon member state request. So all these are the results of the governments of these countries requesting United Nations and requesting REM to advise them on real estate markets. The roundtable in Kiev, Ukraine, was held just 2 months after the policy framework was published. It was our first roundtable. Some of the challenges addressed include a collapse in the price of real estate markets and a lack of real estate financing. New building construction in Ukraine dropped by 2/3 between 2008 and 2009. This was partly due to a burdensome land planning process. As a result of this roundtable, a working group was formed which had representatives of government ministries and the private sector, including the building sector, investors, and experts, to review legislation taking account of the principles of the policy framework. This resulted in the Land Planning Act. The Land Planning Act involved changes in more than 100 articles and 23 laws related to land planning. It simplified the earning planning process. It simplified planning documentation and designation of types of buildings which are eligible for expedited approval process to raise rent. It simplified their steps to obtain a building permit. The number of steps went from 93 to 23, and the time to get a building permit went from 416 days to 60 days. It simplified permits for single-family homes, and it changed building license regulations. And it's hoped that this will result in reduced construction costs, reduced corruption risk, increased transparency, and a revived real estate sector. Our next roundtable was held in Lisbon, Portugal in January 2011. In addition to other challenges, roundtable participants noted that Portugal needed incentives for rehabilitating old building units and to simplify the rules for leasing property. In particular, old rental regulations prevented landlords from raising rents and did not allow them to collect capital to maintain the infrastructure of the apartment. To meet basic standards, it was estimated that 74 billion euros were needed to be invested into Portuguese housing. Some apartments were subject to restrictions from the 1960s, which meant that apartments were rented for as little as 5 euros per month in Lisbon. It was also very difficult to evict tenants, which caused a situation where landlords could not financially justify keeping the buildings in repair. In 2006, reforms were introduced to allow Portuguese landowners more freedoms in negotiating with tenants, but these reforms were only effective if the property was in good repair. Because the rents were so low, the properties often were not in good repair. So, as a result of this roundtable, the Real Estate Market Advisory Group offered to support continued consultations to advise on how to solve these problems. As a follow-up, Portuguese officials were invited along with the BREM Advisory Group to present at the annual meeting of the Marché International des Professionnels de l'Immobilier, MIPIM, held in March of that year in Cannes. In March 2011, Portuguese officials announced they will introduce reforms to rental housing legislation. They announced new laws aimed at simplifying evicting nuisance tenants and simplified the permit process for renovation work. They also simplified the process for certifying that buildings were in good repair. In May 2011, we held another roundtable in Rome, Italy. Some of the topics talked about in this roundtable were real estate market efficiency and transparency, real estate market monitoring and knowledge tools, information for real estate valuation, and georeferencing of data. In particular, the roundtable addressed challenges in public land law. Expropriation law, its implementation, and expropriation compensation were previously imprecisely defined, and in the opinion of the roundtable, this was the primary deterrent to foreign investment in the Italian real estate sector. A consequence of this roundtable was the establishment of a working group to propose legal changes to land governance in Italy. This group proposed a series of law reforms for land management and governance. These reforms were promoted by the Italian Builders Association, the National Council of Architects, Planners, Landscapers, and Keepers, the Italian Engineers Council, and Tecnoborsa. And the amendments they proposed are currently under consideration by the Italian Parliament. And our most recent roundtable was in Moscow, Russia, in January 2012. The purpose of this roundtable was to draw attention to ways in which secure and well-protected property rights and accurate and accessible information can attract greater investment and increase economic growth. Speakers included the Deputy Minister and Director of the Real Estate Department of the Russian Ministry of Economy. It also included the World Bank Country Director for Russia and Alexander Romanenko, World President of FIABCI. Russia is the world's largest country. It presents unique challenges and opportunities. Currently, the World Bank is undertaking a massive project to create a unified cadastre for the entire country. Russia's experiences on this project can provide excellent learning opportunities to other countries who wish to reform the land registration system. An important outcome of this roundtable was to establish 2 working groups to focus on specific policy areas in the Russian real estate sector, one on social housing and another on property valuation and land management. These would involve private experts and government officials. The Russian government, including the Ministries of Economic and Regional Development, have expressed interest in these groups, and we, along with the World Bank, are exploring the possibility of supporting these groups with our own expertise. So, those are the roundtables we've organized so far. There are more to come in the future, and this is just one of the activities which REM does, and one of the many activities which our unit does at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. If you're interested in cooperating with us or learning more about our activities, I've put my contact information here. We are the United Nations, so cooperating with other organizations and individuals is what we do. So, thank you very much for your time. And I'm sorry if I went over.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes for questions, if there are any. Do I have any questions from the floor? There are microphones to come around. Any questions? Because if not, I'm going to ask some difficult ones, especially to the mayor, since he isn't here. Okay, well, then it's my choice. Great. What has happened over the last 4 years has been a fundamental change in how we do real estate, how we have our relationships with the financial institutions who we borrow from. Looking forward, do you, first of all, Holger, I'd like to start with you. Do you see these, Mr. Mayor, would you like to come and join us?
Sorry, they're cutting a cake for me.
I know, I was very jealous. I wanted to come out. We all wanted to come out for the cake, but we couldn't. Do you see different changes in terms of relationship, with banks going forward? You answered a little in your talk, but do you, I know there are a lot of restrictions that are placed. I was at MIPIM a few weeks, well, a couple of months ago, and I went to see a friend of mine who works for the Royal Bank of Scotland. And I said, how's your lending? And he looked at me, Ash, and said, we have no lending at the moment. And I said, well, I've got a property in Washington, D.C., and guess who my lender is? It's your bank. I'm doing a loan with the Royal Bank of Scotland in the United States. And yet you in Paris are telling me you've got no money to spend. He said, I don't know how you can do it, but we can't. What's happening in Europe that's different? Holger.
Well, I can, of course, comment mainly on the situation in Russia and in Germany. And I think in Russia, what is, I mean, it's good for Russia, of course, that we still have these 3 Russian banks who are very active in the market. At the same time, I think it was good to have more competition from Western banks as well, and also bringing in all the way doing business. This I think is very important to develop the market in Russia. So, in this extent, it is for the Russian market in general probably not ideal that all these foreign banks are gone. If I look at the German market, which I know better, I think a very interesting situation there is that the German state-owned Landesbanks have experienced terrible difficulties during this crisis, and I think they will probably be much weaker in the future, and therefore a big part of real estate lending will be simply gone. And what is left then is Deutsche Bank, which anyway hadn't been that active in this thing in itself because it's more an investment bank, and Commerzbank, who for the time being stopped everything as well. So my feeling is that we will see less of commercial banking really in lending, but we will have to look at other ways of intermediation, and we will see especially probably insurance companies to get directly into this, and that's something what we see already even in the Russian market. So there might be a total change of business models going on. This is one thing. What I find interesting right now, coming back to Hernando de Soto's presentation this morning, is that I think indeed we are in a situation in which it's very difficult to understand where we are right now. This is a very thick and heavy fork, especially here in Europe. And I just was surprised that one of our clients, they're just this Russian company which are buying real estate in Germany, and they do it all equity finance. They don't want to have any financing at all. It makes for them still sense just to buy it all equity.
Okay, great. Thank you. Alfons, you are very busy with your company in Central and Eastern Europe. Is there much difference between Western Europe and Central and Eastern Europe in terms of the banks and how they're looking at real estate?
Natürlich gibt es Unterschiede.
Of course, there is a difference, but I would like to say that the problem of bank financing is like this. Banks receive money not necessarily from their equity. They can operate as consortia. Banks provide funds for various projects. This is not the problem. If banks see that there are a lot of skeletons in the cupboard, they are not going to be active, and they need to understand how to tackle those problems. They make provisions of equity in a certain amount, and in a certain time frame, those provisions must reach 9 to 10%. It's very difficult to achieve in several months' time. The problem is that banks in the past and now decided themselves which project is a good one and which is a bad one, and they took part in many projects out of their own accord. If a bank officer who gives out loan sits on one floor and an analyst is sitting on another floor, and they do not necessarily communicate. This analytical work must be streamlined, and we need to understand whether the bank management is capable of taking this project on board at all. They need to understand what kind of business model is at work with regard to this project, and they should assess risks and opportunities. They need to assess the true viability of the project. That's the issue.
In terms of the UN, I've seen an increasing pattern over the last few years of wanting to reach out and touch real estate organizations such as FIABCI, such as the members of FIABCI, the principal members, which is encouraging to all of us because we're in a global economy. We're touching a lot of different sides of real estate that are really important to the UN, like social housing, like the environment, and the universities are becoming involved. Do you see the increase in international real estate education as an important part of working with the UN?
So, is this working? Okay. The question is, do I see an increase in real estate education as an important part of the work of the UN? Well, absolutely. It's very important. In our unit, that's educating. I wouldn't necessarily use the word educating. I'd use the word experience sharing and knowledge sharing, because the UN is a great organization for facilitating collaboration between governments and private individuals. Everyone has their own knowledge, and it's something our unit is working constantly to do, is to help everybody benefit from everybody else's knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, this time next year, well, a few weeks later, in fact, you're going to be welcoming us to Taichung. What is the one fundamental difference that you would like our real estate experts here to be looking at Taichung for, and what is the one distinguishing factor that you are more proud of anything else in your city?
Thank you. Despite the brief absence I have to make from the meeting outside for that delicious cake, I actually enjoyed very much the discussion and talk today, the presentations and from every gentleman. I came with a belief, probably not so orthodox. I didn't want to say it. I don't want to be the joint enemy of all these gentlemen. But I don't think there are good areas or barriers, good cities or bad cities to invest in. I think there are good projects and bad projects. You know, Professor Metzger talked about Central Eastern Europe. I was once responsible for taking a lot of Taiwanese investment into Eastern Europe. Then, for political reasons, you know, the factories and everything, the bank all went in. We all lost tremendous amount of money. We didn't work with PricewaterhouseCoopers, perhaps then, you know.
You did or you didn't?
I didn't.
Okay.
That's
a mistake,
okay,
of course.
make your day. But
Please say it again. Please say it again.
what I'm saying is, we, in probably the other part of the world, need FIABCI and all you gentlemen to come and discuss with us. We think we're an area, but we may not be a good city. We're a good city with a lot of good projects, and we have bad projects too. Which are good, which are bad? We wait until next May to find out.
Ooh.
That's what I meant. You know,
Okay.
I'm not complaining, but I think most of the discussion, most of the attention are focused on this part of the world. You talk about China. You did, I know, but not much.
I can speak about China.
Well, Alfons,
You don't want to see a fight.
he's special.
You want to say something.
Ich möchte vielleicht jetzt zum Abschluss noch ein
I will tell you a brief story. I was present at a discussion with a bank manager from Austria. They were extremely successful in Eastern Europe, and now they have problems. And we talked about the following. Why don't they have independent valuers? They say they're very expensive, those independent valuers. And I told them I will go back to my office and we will calculate the losses and we will compare the losses with the cost of a highly qualified expert. And the appraisers of the highest quality would cost 3% of the money the bank lost as a result of incorrect valuations. And this testifies to the fact that we need to think, we need to use our brains, we need to invest in experts so that they could objectively and impartially value the projects that we pursue. Otherwise, we sustain huge losses. We spend money on a lawyer if we are involved in a litigation. We know what we are paying for. Here, we need to recognize the role of experts.
We know which firms we recommend that they would go and hire, of course. I'd like you all to give a big round of applause to my 4 very different speakers today. They address 4 very different subjects very well. Thank you. I think we're going to go on to the next session very quickly. So either take a very quick break or hold your seats.
Thank you so much.
And
Nice to meet you.
Judy, it's your panel now, I think, so I'll hand over.